Meneer Steenkamp, again, guys, in the hall with us is Roger Baxter, new inductee, Mr. Peter Steenkamp, new inductee into the South African Hall of Fame. I think we can applaud them one more time. Yeah, let's keep distance here between us. I support that. I've prepared many questions for you, Peter. No, that was last night's speech. I can't repeat that. Remember, last night I had to be nice to you. And I mean, now it's a different ball game.
Different ball game. No.
So, Peter, this is weird. Well, for me, it's very weird because I'm hoping to make this a useful conversation for the 115 odd people online and for the 200 people still here. And yet, we're two old white men talking about a dying industry. And a shared experience, 45 years in the mining industry. I mean, distill out of that, what is it in the Peter Steenkamp story that would be of value to young people, young school leavers, young mining engineers, young technical people?
Yeah, Bernard, I think when I started, I mean, it's been more or less the same time. I still recall it, it's in '81 when I got a scholarship to go and study. And gold came from 250,000 of 250,000 ounce or dollar pounds to 800 in a very short period of time. And there was a big hype about gold mining, and mines were big, it was strong, and today, the gold mining industry is obviously much smaller. I just started at Vaal Reefs. And at the time when I started there, we had over 80,000 people working there.
80,000 people on a mine?
On Vaal Reefs complex.
Yeah.
The big complex was a west, south, and north mine. So, for me at the time, it was obviously big, difficult, and starting in this big organization was there. But I think over time, it developed into something much smaller. The big money was not there anymore. We really had to scratch around to be good managers, to be able to keep mines alive and actually keep them going. And I think, the story of this absolute wealth that we had in one point in time, and then had to go back to really, really strong management skills to actually keep our industry alive, to where we today, again, is where the gold mining industry is very good. So I think, that whole cycle that we've been through is quite interesting, I think. And, PGMs at the moment are more or less in that cycle. But it will be better times one day again, and you just have to stick around with it. But I think for me, personally, it's been I actually didn't intend to study mining engineering. I just happened to get a big scholarship to go and study it. I actually wanted to become a chartered accountant. Can you believe it?
The confessions of a chartered accountant.
But for me, it was really a career that I loved from the day I started. From running these big underground mines, and then obviously later on, working with the people that we have in industry. So I really enjoyed every moment of that.
You touched on a few last night, but please share with us your highs and successes. If you look back and in a moment, and I know you're a humble guy, but in a moment of arrogance, perhaps after a few beers, what would you say, these were my highs, these were the moments of success?
Well, I think basically, all the different phases were, highs in a certain way. But I would like to highlight maybe three. I think for me, the first one was really when Vaal Reefs number 10 shaft, which later became Taulakua mine, was a brand new shaft. I was a very young graduate manager, and actually were given the shaft to actually put into production. We just started, sinking was completed and started this mine. It was, at that time, the technologies were, the best in the industry. And I was very pleased and also very fortunate to be offered that opportunity to build that mine. It became one of the best, performing mines in terms of efficiencies and everything else. I think the ARM Gold start was really, really something special because at that time, everybody were retrenched. We started actually with new conditions of employment. We put continuous operations in place, and I think it's probably the only time we had continuous operations in a gold mine ever worked was at ARM Gold. We had a fantastic, team that we stuck together because we kind of selected everybody to stay in the team that could stay in the team. So it was, the miner actually chooses crew, the ship boss crew is the miner, and so it goes on the way to, and I will choose the mine captains that will work on the mine. Because we had quite a big restructuring process in that. But it was very successful, and obviously the JV with Harmony at the time, and the Freegold JV was also very successful. But I must take the last stint with Harmony has really been really, really special. I mean, it was a tough assignment when we started, and actually panned out to be very good. And what was wonderful for me is to catch up with all the people that I used to know in Harmony again, and actually work with them. And they were, like I said, one of probably the best teams you can find.
So you say you were a young, recent graduate, mining engineering graduate, when you got your chance at Tauleko. How young, how old were you?
Oh, I think I was probably 28.
Can I go into Harmony and find 28-year-old people giving those opportunities? It's not a Harmony question. I often make the point that we got given fantastic opportunities at a young age.
Yeah.
I'm not sure we do that for the next generation, or are we? Are we giving young people real big opportunities?
Yeah, I think the world has changed a lot. I mean, if you look at, at one stage when I was a mine captain, I actually break 12,000 square meters as a mine captain. Now we have shafts that do that, so it's very difficult, or different at this point in time. But if you want to look at we have a mixed bag of experience, but also young people in our organization. We've got fairly young GMs at the moment. Again, people that actually got the experience of working underground, deep-level gold mines, which we train them very well, I think, through our processes. So yes, we do give young people opportunities. Obviously, there's, if you look at my bunch of my team of GMs, they're not very old. They are fairly young. But I'm not talking about 28 probably, but maybe a little bit older than that.
There must have been lows. I mean, a career can't only have highs. There must have been a few lows, and I'm going there to distill the learnings that you took out of your career lows. What?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest one for me was the experience at Pomotsi Gold. That was, I think, a 2.5-year experience. We had a very difficult time, and when we tried to float the company and get it going, it was, in a much better situation in terms of price, and then obviously the credit crunch came. Very difficult to find financing for the company, and eventually had to liquidate the company, or put it in business rescue. It was a tough time, but I must say we had also, I've learned some very, very good character people that worked with us at the time, and I mean, one of them was here today, Martin Skermers, who's a financial person at the time, financial director, and then also Tony Murdoch Eaton, which is, I think, a fantastic person that ran the operations. And we really tried to get this thing off the ground, but unfortunately didn't work,
And so, learnings out of that?
Well, I think the first thing is you have to be very careful when you do acquisitions, when you do try and grow the company. I think we were kind of, in a certain way, we're a victim of our success in the past, the ARM Gold story, even the Harmony story at the time. And today, when we do things like expanding a company like we did with Harmony, we are very, very careful in terms of what we're buying, what quality of assets we're buying, and potentially we can get it right. Because even if we had a down cycle in buying the quality of Moab Khotsong or the Mponeng mine, it would have worked because of the fact that the mines are, quality type of mines.
I know this is like a corny, cliched question, but I want to ask it anyway. I mean, what advice would you be giving the younger Peter? I mean, if you could go back and go to this 25-year-old guy, what advice would you give with this benefit of hindsight now?
Yeah, I think, in my career, I really had, I think, quite a lot of support. So I didn't really have too many of issues that I, didn't, promoted fast enough or anything like that. But I can say to any young person that goes into a career, love what you do. It must, because you're going to spend a hell of a lot of time there. So, so you've got to love what you do. So in the first place. And the second thing is, never ever take mediocrity there. You know, always trying to do better, trying to improve the things that you have. And if you're there, make sure that if you're the shift boss, you are the number one shift boss in a section. If you're the mine captain, you're number one mine captain on the shaft. If you're the manager of an operation, you're doing the best.
So I can honestly tell you more than one person has told me about you, best boss ever. What's that about? What, I mean, what? So why do you think people say that? Let's assume, I mean, believe me, people say that about you. Why do you think they say that about you?
Oh, I don't know. I think, you know, one thing, you know, I've learned a lot from Andre Wilkins, and he was the best boss ever, in my views. When I worked with him, and the one thing that he always did is give me, you know, the freedom to make choices and do things. And I think I tried always in my life to surround myself with really, really good people that are smarter than I am. And then secondly, to give them the freedom to perform and to make the choices and trying to create a kind of a family culture in the sense that we're in this together. We don't play the man, we really play the ball. And if there's opportunities on things that doesn't work well, then we need to get it to fix it. So, you know, I think in most times I've been very loyal to the people that work for me. Very few times in my life I've been disappointed because I think I make very careful selections in terms of who's working with you.
So, I mean, you spoke, and that takes us into the issue of sort of leadership skills. But if we were to have a leadership conversation, so what are the leadership skills that you have, perhaps you may not have, but that you would think is the leadership skills for the next CEO of Harmony?
Well, I think extremely important today's life is to listen to people. And to listen to people, you have to spend time with them. If you have, you know, you have to know the leadership of your unions. You have to make time to spend with them. There is not always, you know, not in a confrontational way, but also on a social way. So you have to have great things like, for instance, a steering committee dinner, so that you can really have a time to spend with them. And the same, I think, with any of your people that work for you. It's not only in a review session or, you know, any of the other kind of meetings, formal meetings, but create an opportunity to do that. And that takes time. It takes time to go to all the different mines and be there and do that. And you have got to lead from the front. And, you know, I always talk about how do you really put a your culture, change your culture in a very, very big company. It's quite difficult because how do you actually get the time that the people can have one-on-ones with you in terms of discussions, and that's where you actually have an impact on the culture of the company.
I find this very interesting. So to spend time on the mine. So if you were to look at your diary for the last year, I mean, CEOs have to be in Denver. CEOs have to be in Papua New Guinea. They have to be at the Joburg and Indaba. So, I mean, how much of your time would you say do you spend? I'm not talking about wherever head office is Randfontein. I'm talking on the mines. What percentage of your time would you say you spent actually at the mines?
Not a lot in terms of physical on the mine. I mean, obviously we do have very formalized VFLs. We have, I've got review sessions with people. We try and do them most of the time on the mines. I had mass meetings with everybody when we launched, for instance, the safety meetings, and after that, you know, we have formal mass meetings with the whole workforce, you know, obviously broken up in different mines and so forth. But I think, you know, important that we create the opportunities on, you know, after reviews and things like that to spend the evening together, have a braai and have a conversation with people. But important that we get, you know, people actually understand who you are and what you stand for.
So, I mean, it sounds, and I obviously have observed that you sort of lead from within the team. You don't lead from a distance. Is that?
Yeah, that's to me quite important. That's why you have to retire when you're 65, because you can't crawl the slopes anymore.
But then I'm not 65, so I've got many years left. Many years left. Peter, I want to change a little bit from this sort of talking about you and your skills to, you sit here and quite honestly, even if you say really harsh things, by the time the minister wants to nail you, you've retired. By the time your shareholders are pissed off, you've cashed in. So what are the key issues facing mining in South Africa, in your opinion? I mean, but as blunt as you can be, or as, what are the issues that we are being faced with?
Okay, first of all, I want to talk a bit about Harmony first, because I think it's important that people understand, because I mean, we've taken over these assets from AngloGold Ashanti, which obviously were not capitalized at the time. And we've now approved and are in execution of all 3 of those assets to create their lives to 20 years plus, where they were before. We, in actual fact, are basically completing Mine Waste Solutions tailings facilities now. We'll have a ceremonial first pour in a week or 2 from now. And that will add 20 years to the life of Mine Waste Solutions. And it is so. We have a long future in South Africa for mining, both underground and also on surface. Yes, we have, some of the mines will not be that long, because, I mean, we really mined out, or the economic parts of the mines are mined out. So we as a company have to go and look at other areas where we could go. So we're fortunate that we have the Wafi-Golpu project, and obviously also Eden Valley Mine, which potentially can also be extended for quite a long period of time. And then, of course, the Eva Copper project that we're building in Australia. We've been very, very, very disciplined in terms of making sure whatever we buy must be better quality than we have. And so we actually run out of runway in terms of an operating mine, the typical old way that we've done it in South Africa, because I don't think there's that many gold assets in Africa that we can buy that will have all-in sustaining costs lower than 1,500, which is our current dollars per ounce, which our current one is. So we have to go and look at other shores and see what we can do. So yes, we've got enough. And what we do have in front of us is that we can be a 1.5 million ounce producer up to 2040. We've got all the assets in our hands, already owned by ourselves, only need to be developed. So that's quite I think when I started with Harmony, we had this million-ounce producer with a cliff right in front of us. So that's been, changed quite dramatically over time. Yes, in South Africa, I think if we want to look at South Africa, and again, I don't really have the benefit of operating in North America and those kind of places. I never found South Africa a difficult place to operate. It really didn't. I've always been able to resolve issues. The minister is sitting there. If I've got an issue, I can get back the phone and I can speak to him. You can't necessarily do that in other countries. And for me, it's always been, we're not shying away from investing back in South Africa. We're probably going to put about 17 billion rand of investments in the next couple of years in terms of building all extending the lives of these mines. So, we've never shied away from operating in South Africa. So we obviously, from a gold perspective, we are running out of reserves, and that is a problem that we have. But in terms of if I were a platinum producer or a coal producer, and there's a market for that, I would certainly be able, would invest in South Africa.
So in the 2 days, we're going to hear a lot about whatever, from the cadastre system to foreign direct investment to policy certainty. Now, I mean, when you go and sit wherever you're going to sit next, we can talk about it after this. I mean, what are these issues that you are leaving for the next guy? I mean, what are the single biggest issues facing then a CEO of a mining company? Stakeholder management, difficult minister, obviously, but that's a given. We all have him.
Yeah, no, I think, like I said, we didn't find it difficult to operate here. If one look in terms of, where we as and again, I'm talking about the South African context more than anything else. I think, I would not shy. At the end of the day, if we look at our share price performance, and we were, I think, last year the best performing share price on the New York Stock Exchange. And that's all about actually creating margins, being able to deliver consistently, and also, deliver on the promises that we made. We had the 9-year stint of being able to meet our guidances every time, actually beating the guidance. So the consistency is in place. If one look in terms of where we operate at the moment, we've been able to have predictability in terms of our cost in South Africa. We signed a 5-year wage agreement with our labor unions. That gives us a lot of predictability there. The problem is obviously always in the energy supply, which is an issue in terms of not in supply per se, but in terms of cost. But we are investing into renewables to bring that cost down. So I think over time we will be in a position where we can really not have this massive inflation in terms of energy cost. So operating here in terms of being predictable, the flexibility that we have, the certainty that we have, I think is fairly good. And for that reason, we are able to reinvest, and that's what we've done.
So let's talk a little bit about the next phase of Pieter Steenkamp's life. What happens in the next 10 years?
Yeah, no, I'm obviously not thinking of that now. I still have 3 months to go. So, but yes, obviously I would like to be still involved in the industry going forward. And there are some, obviously after I retired, we'll make some, whenever.
But Patrice never lets anybody retire, so you'll stay on all those boards. But apart from those boards, I mean, you think there's like an active giving back? Do you think you can mentor? I mean, just
yeah, I've always been able to be quite part of with, obviously the university, in terms of external examinator, those type of things. And that's really, I like that. I mean, that's really to meet with these youngsters when they actually bright-eyed final year students is wonderful to be part of that.
Ladies, gentlemen, 45 years in the industry, the man is mad, but underneath the madness clearly is some deep wisdom. I wish every CEO could retire at the peak. It's not destined for anybody because a lot of it is external. It helps that the gold price is up, etc., etc. But I must say, when somebody with such a successful career, this is like retiring as the winning captain at the World Cup. This is what you are achieving. And again, we said a lot of nice things about you last night. I hope the lessons you've shared lands with some younger people. And I think in those 45 years, you stuck it out. Yeah. I mean, you didn't take the first opportunity to get out. So I think a fantastic role model for our industry. Pieter Steenkamp, thank you for joining us as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernard. Thank you.